For example, let's take the example of someone telling the narcissist, you are ugly and unattractive, and no one will have sex with you. You're repulsive. Okay. So the first thing that happens is this external input is immediately perceived as valid because there's no balance inside the narcissist. There are no structures inside the narcissist that would oppose this assessment, that would say, I'm not ugly, I am attractive. Even his rationality is disabled, where he could have told himself, wait a minute, but I've had many women. I mean, that's not true. It's factually untrue. No. The external input is immediately validated as 100%, 1000% true. And that's it. Because hitherto, up until the moment that he had received the negative input, he thought of himself as irresistible, as sexy, as attractive, as handsome, as amazing. This new input forces him to dismantle his grandiosity and rewrite his history, create effectively new fake memories. He creates fake memories to conform to and support the new negative information about his attractiveness or lack of attractiveness. And what happens to the previous grandiose defense? I'm irresistible, I'm handsome, and so on. It's gone, it's dead. So if a sufficient number, if there is a critical threshold of negative inputs, all the memories are revised and all the grandiosity defenses are dismantled, and he's left naked, skinless, in direct touch with reality, abrasive and bruising as it is. And this is mortification. Now back to misinformation effect. I said that misinformation effect has been studied for at least 4 or 5 decades, and they discovered that certain things precondition people to the misinformation effect. In other words, some people react very strongly to the misinformation effect. So when they receive new information, they revise previous memories, they fake them, they dismantle them and reassemble them in wrong ways. They deny their own memory, and so on. And this is what the narcissist does. So they discovered certain behaviors and certain traits that predispose people to do this. Susceptibility. Not everyone reacts the same to the misinformation effect. Some traits and some qualities increase or decrease one's susceptibility to recalling misinformation. And so age, for example, working memory capacity, personality traits, and the ability to conjure and deal with imagery. You remember how we started this lecture when we were both much younger? Aphantasia, inability to process imagery. So imagery, or inability to process imagery, is intimately connected to the misinformation effect, which leads essentially to mortification. Narcissists cannot process imagery, empathic imagery. He has no imagery of people. The Myers-Briggs type indicator is a kind of test that assesses personalities. I personally like it a lot. It's frowned upon in academia. If you talk to stodgy professors, they will tell you, no, it's bullshit. It's this. I disagree completely. I think it's one of the hugest. It has one of the hugest databases of personality tests in the world, and it was among the first to suggest a dimensional approach. So it was much ahead of its time. I am all for the MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator. So when the MBTI was applied to people who were exposed to the misinformation effect, they discovered that introvert, intuitive participants were more likely to accept both accurate and inaccurate post-event information. Extrovert, sensate participants were much less likely to accept both accurate and inaccurate post-event information. Introverts are more likely to have lower confidence in their memory, more likely to accept misinformation. In this sense, never mind how gregarious, how sociable, how outgoing, how life of the party the narcissist is, the narcissist is an introvert. That's not some Vaknin. That's Carl Jung. Carl Jung was the first to link introversion with narcissism. I recommend that you watch the video I've made about Jung's perception of narcissism. Narcissists are introverts. They're introverted because they are schizoid. And schizoids by definition are introverted. Schizoids are not sociable. They don't like people. They don't want people. People give them no pleasure. They don't want even sex. And all narcissists have a schizoid core, and they're introverted. They go out of their way to socialize and so on because they need constant narcissistic supply. It's a compulsion. But at the core, they're introverted. And yes, they do not trust. They do not have confidence in their memory. And they're more likely to accept misinformation. Individual personality characteristics, including empathy, absorption, self-monitoring, have also been linked to greater susceptibility. And here, both heightened empathy and no empathy are actually lead to the same results. If you had watched my previous videos, I cited many studies, several studies, that had demonstrated that if you have very high empathy, you misjudge people badly. The higher your empathy, the less well you read people, the less well you understand people. It's counterintuitive, and I explain it in these videos. These are the recent studies. I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but these are the recent studies. So heightened empathy and no empathy are the same. In both conditions, you cannot read people properly. Self-absorption is, of course, narcissistic. Self-monitoring is definitely narcissistic. Narcissist self-monitors all the time, positions himself, sculpts himself. He is an actor. He's like in a theater play. Maximum self-monitoring. That's the irony. Narcissists are actually hyper when it comes to self-awareness. They have too much self-awareness, which in itself is a fascinating topic. One could describe narcissism very well and derive it from excess or pathological self-awareness. But again, it's a topic for another lecture. At any rate, these traits, disturbances in empathy, fluctuations in empathy, dysregulated empathy, no empathy, self-absorption and self-monitoring were linked in studies to the misinformation effect. There's also evidence that the misinformation effect is much bigger in social groups when people are together, probably because they influence each other's memories and probably because of peer pressure of some kind. There is a phenomenon which is like a hive mind. Memories blend, misinformation diffuses. It seems that when we're in a group or when we're with another person, for example, in intimate setting, we derive part of our memories, or we reframe and reshape our memories according to input from the other person, which is pretty amazing because it means that our minds meld, become one when it comes to memory, and we process memory together. When you're with an intimate partner on a date, you process memories together. That's why I'm dead set against the concept of individual. I don't think there's such a thing. What we call individual is a node in a network, is a bead in Indra's net. It's interconnected. To define a person, you need a relational approach. Even something highly intimate, highly special, highly idiosyncratic, highly personal, like memory, is manipulated, influenced by other people in the room. You shape your memories according to input from these people, and they shape theirs simultaneously the same way. So the misinformation effect operates in a very interesting way, which ties it intimately to mortification. First of all, when you have experienced an event or something, you store it. You don't rehearse it. You don't actively rehash it and go through it. If you do, it's a problem. It's called rumination, and it's considered a pathology. It's a problem. The longer the delay between the presentation of the original event and the post-event information, the more likely it is that individuals will incorporate the misinformation into the new memory. The longer. So this is the narcissist problem. There's usually a huge delay between the countervailing, negative, humiliating, shaming information and the original memories that he's revising. So he has memories from childhood, for example, and then 40 years later, someone tells him something, which is very humiliating and disturbing and so on. And because there's such an enormous delay, the misinformation effect is almost total. The longer, I repeat, the longer the gap in time between the original memory and the misinformation provided later, the longer the gap, the more the original memory is revised. More time to study the original event, if you dedicate more time to study the original event, leads to lower susceptibility to the misinformation effect because of increased rehearsal time. Loftus coined a phrase called discrepancy detection principle. She said that a person's recollections are more likely to change if they do not immediately detect the discrepancies between misinformation and the original event. Sometimes people recognize some discrepancy between the memory and what they're being told, but not always, this doesn't always have effect. And if the discrepancy is spotted much later, people tend to doubt their memory. People might recollect, I thought I saw something, I saw this and this, but the new information mentions another thing. So I guess I must have been wrong. It was that other thing. People generally don't trust their memories. People, in many cases, in about half the cases actually, people would adopt later information which contradicts their memories. They would adopt the later information and drop their memories. Now imagine the narcissist. It's gone, it's dead.